I'm Bob Darrell. I'm an alcoholic. So the second section of the inventory is on fear. It's odd, you know. I seem to go back every. It's been a while now, but I guess I probably average about every 6-7 years, maybe 8. I don't know. I'll end up going back and doing an in-depth steps 4 through 9, and basically because I leak. And if I understand theoretically that if I was diligent and consistently diligent in step 8 or step 10 and 11, that I probably would never need to do that. But I, like so many of us, leak. I'm not as diligent with that stuff, and it slips through the cracks. And as Wilson said, no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. So what happens is if you don't do that great of if you do a half-assed job in step 10 and 11, next thing you know, you get weird. And it's not that you really get weird. You're not really getting weird, but it just seems like everybody around you has gotten weird. And so it's time to do inventory. It's time to clean house, make amends, etc. And I don't necessarily have to do it because there's anything wrong with me. I do it because I'm a giver and there's something wrong with you. And so when I do the work, you seem to get better. And so I do the work because it's better when you're better. And it's really not you, but it's me. But because of this self-centered disease of perception, when I'm sick, it looks like it's you. So the next section is fear. And the point I was trying to make is in my early years of sobriety, when I go back through the steps again, in the beginning it was a lot on resentment, a little bit on fear, a little bit on sex, not much. And then I went through a phase after my first divorce where it was a lot on sex, a lot on fear, a little bit on resentment. And now it seems like in the last 10, 15 years, it's probably mostly fear. Because I can see past the resentments that every single resentment's fear. Something was threatened. Little announcement. It just is a public service announcement because I'm an other-centered guy. You might want to turn your cell phones off, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't matter to me. But if it goes off in the meeting, what happens? Well, everybody sitting around you turns and looks at you. And you'll spend the rest of the meeting having a conversation in your head with everyone who turned and looked at you, trying to explain yourself to them. And let's face it, your ex is not going to come to their senses and be properly ashamed of themselves during this meeting and call. So you might as well just turn it off, save yourself a lot of grief. Public service announcement. So, yeah, right. So fear. Bill in step 7 in the 12 steps and 12 traditions says that self-centered fear is the chief activator of all our defects of character. Alcoholics don't lie because they're liars. They lie because they're afraid. I lie to myself because I'm afraid of the truth. I lie to you because of a fear of confrontation and rejection. I lie to you because I'm afraid. And isn't fear behind it all, really? What's greed except the fear of not having enough and the fear of not ever being fulfilled and getting my share? What's lust except the fear of loneliness and disconnection and being alone and lack of never being intimate? What's anger except a defense mechanism that I use when I'm threatened or hurt? So fear is really the driving force. Earlier in the book it says that we're driven by 100 forms of it. I didn't even know. There was fears that I had in my life. I didn't even know they were fears. So I finished my Resentment inventory. I'm a little over 4 years sober. I'm sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad, and I wrote fears across the top of the page. And I'm sitting there, and I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of anything I'm afraid of. Now, I knew that when I got sober, I had a lot of fears. Like I was afraid of going to prison, but I dealt with all that and didn't have to go. It was amazing. I was afraid of being homeless, but I'm out of that. I'm not going to be homeless. I was afraid of a lot of stuff, but I don't think I have any fears anymore. And so I thought, well, for God's sakes, I'm sober. Over 4 years, I've been praying every day. I've took that third step. Maybe AA works, and I'm just not afraid anymore. So I went to this intergroup speaker meeting, and after the meeting, I went out to a restaurant with a bunch of the old-timers, speaker and a couple other the old-timers, and I'm sitting in there, and I'm telling this guy that I'm doing an inventory. A little over 4 years sober, I'm doing a 4-step, and I've discovered that I don't have any fears. And he looks at me and he goes, really? And I said, yeah, I can't find any fears. He said, could I ask you some questions? I said, yeah, sure. He said, well, are you afraid of large, angry, barking dogs? Well, everybody is, for God's sake. Well, yeah, but we're not talking about everybody. We're talking about you. Well, yeah, all right. So you can put that down. He said, are you afraid of rattlesnakes? Well, yeah, I'm afraid of black widows, but yeah. Then he gets a little more personal. He says, are you afraid of what people might be thinking about you? Ooh. Oh, yeah. I watch your body language just to make sure you're not hostile towards me. I'm always thinking about what you might be thinking about me. He said, are you afraid of dying old alone? Are you afraid of no one will ever love you? Are you afraid that God isn't really going to be there for you like he is for those good people in AA? Are you afraid of getting sick and not being able to take care of yourself? Are you afraid of cancer? I had cancer 3,000 times in my mind. I don't get headaches. I get brain tumors. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's just, I bet you I have at least a couple dozen just deep, heartfelt deathbed speeches rehearsed in my head. He said, are you afraid of success and what people might expect? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of never being a success? And he went on, and then he finally said, so, is there anything you're not afraid of? And I tell you, if you're new, you might as well just stay away from those old timers. It's some kind of spiritual jujitsu. They just turn that stuff on you somehow. I don't know how they do it. And what I discovered is exactly what it says in the book when it says that our fear, the very fabric of our existence is shot through with it, and yet I can't see it. I'm like a fish looking for water. It is the driving force in my life, and I don't know it. I don't know that it drives the way I show up at work. It drives how I go to meetings, how I sit, how I posture, what I say, how I dress. My fear of what you'll think of me, and my fear of not having approval. That fear is really and truly the driving, it's the muscle of the ego. Isn't it? It's so funny. I get to AA and I have if there's any trust muscle in me, it's atrophied and is about dead. But the fear muscle, strong. And so the book says, what do? We list our fears. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So once again, I'm making a list down this left-hand side, everything I'm afraid of. I put down all my creditors. Because every time I owe someone, I have a small measure of anxiousness about the debt. I put all my secrets down of the things I've done to people that nobody knows about. the money I've stolen that nobody knows I stole it. I put all of that down because you can't have a secret without having something that can be threatened and needs to be defended. Right? So that's a fear. Guilt's a fear. It's a fear of retribution. It's a fear of consequences, a fear of exposure. I put it all down. And I list all that stuff. And then the second thing, it says we ask ourselves why we had these fears. And this is a good question because later on, when we get into the section on step 8, it says something very interesting. It says we have a list of all the people we harmed. We made it when we took inventory. So every name on my resentment list goes on my 8-step amends list. And some of you, I can hear the voices in your head. They're saying, whoa, 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 whoa. Everybody? Yes. Because remember, amends is not about right or wrong. It's if they're on your list, there's separation between you and them that needs to be mended. Now, maybe you don't have to go to them. Maybe it's just forgiving them. Maybe it's sweeping away off your side of the street, ignoring what they did wrong. But if they're separate, they get on the list. And we're going to have amends that come out of the fear list. So, and here's how you find out what they are. You ask yourself why you have the fears. And I'll tell you, we're funny people. I was at a rehab a couple years ago, Samaritan House, and the meeting's over, and this guy comes up to me. He's working on his 4-step. He says, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Let's go outside." Because you can't smoke in the house. He wants to smoke. We're going to go outside. And we're sitting out there, and he pulls out a cigarette and lights it up, takes a big hit off it, and he says, I have some fears, and I don't know why I have them. And I said, "Oh, okay. Give me an example." And he takes another hit off the cigarette, and he said, "Well, I get this fear of cancer." And then he says to me, "I don't know why I have it. My parents never had cancer. I was never traumatized." He's looking for some deep childhood Freudian reason. And he's smoking. And I said, "Could it be because you're smoking?" And it was like a deer in the headlights. Oh, because he finally gets it. It's all unfinished business. It's all stuff you're going to bring God into, you're going to bring actions into. I had a guy not too long ago, a little while back, and I wanted him to go to a meeting with me across town, and he didn't want to go. And I kind of knew why he didn't want to go, but he doesn't know I know why he doesn't want to go. And he says, "Oh, I don't really like that meeting." I said, "Oh, yeah, really? Huh. What is it about that meeting you don't like?" "Oh, just not my type of people, that's all." You don't have to like everybody, do you?" "Well, I suppose not. Is there anybody in particular at that meeting that you just feel like don't like to be around?" "Well, so-and-so, not my kind of person, don't really care for him much." I said, "So you're a little anxious about being around him?" "Well, I don't know if it's anxious. I just don't like him. I don't want to be around him." And I said, do you know why that is?" And he said, I just don't like him, that's all." I said, "Could it be," because I knew something he didn't know I knew. I said, "Could it be you don't want to go around him because you talk crap about him behind his back when he's not around, and you're afraid someone might have told him. Now you don't want to go to a meeting where he goes." And he looked at me like, "How did you know that?" "Well, because I know me." An alcoholic, properly armed with information about himself, can help another alcoholic when no one else can. And so with the help of your sponsor in your 5th step, if you haven't been able to answer this question in your 4th, you're going to try to answer it in your 5th to find out what's the unfinished business here. Why do I have this fear? Some people are afraid of doing their taxes. Why? Because they've been cheating on their taxes for years. So why do you have these fears? We put them on paper. Wasn't it because the book says, sort of tries to answer in a generalized rhetorical manner, I suppose. where it says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance is good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. As a matter of fact, earlier in this section, it talks about fear setting in motion trains of circumstances which will bring you more misfortune you will feel you don't deserve. And then it says, but didn't we set the ball rolling? See, the reason self-reliance fails me is that when I try to manage my fears, I make them worse. Because most of my fears are around problems that don't exist. Problems that will correct themselves in time because they're not really problems. It's a perceived problem based on fear. And what happens is I get in there and start on self-reliance, and instead of solving the fear problem, I make it worse. I can give you a couple examples. One of my first sober relationship, I'm dating this girl. I don't have a good job. I'm staying with somebody. I have an old $100 car. I have nothing to bring to the table except need. Right? I don't have any, I'm like the black hole of love, you know what I mean? You don't want to get too close to me, you won't be able to get your ship out of my vortex, and so it's all I got. It's all I got's neediness, because I've not done any work or anything in life to fill my own vacancies. I have nothing to give here except need. And so I go into this relationship with a tremendous fear. And it's unrealized, because I don't even want to talk to myself about this fear, because I don't even want to admit to myself that I'm this pathetic. But the truth is, I'm scared to death she's going to leave me. And what happens? Unbeknownst to me, this fear drives me, and it works on me until I'm the guy that's driving by her apartment in the middle of the night, peeking in the windows to make sure no guys are there. It drives me to be watching her I see her when we're in a meeting together. I'm always watching her. And if some guy comes up and hugs her, man, I'm jumping the guy after the meeting. You stay away from my girlfriend. My fear of her leaving me drove me to such a level of fear and possessiveness that I didn't even know I was starting to drive her right out of my life. She said to me one time, she said, I don't like to go to meetings with you. I said, how come? She says, because every time I look up, you're looking at me. Well, yeah. I don't even get it. I don't even know what I'm doing. And what happened is my fear of her leaving me set in motion and positioned me to make the fear come true. Psychiatrists call it self-fulfilling prophecies. And my sponsor tried to talk to me about that, and he tried to tell me I was doing it, and I didn't get it. I remember the day she left. She eventually went with some other guy, just left. And I was devastated. Here's funny thing. My ego made the judgment that she was going to leave me, and then it started positioning to protect me from that. And when she left, I heard a little voice in my head say to me, in the midst of my desolation and pain, the voice said, "See, you were right." I like being right. Gut shot, devastated, thinking about drinking, but I'm right. And how does that happen? We make this stuff. I've lost jobs for the same reason, because I go to work and I'm afraid that people won't accept me there. And the fear of not being liked and accepted and fitting there has driven me to be the odd man out, the guy that eventually I'm so on the muscle at work and so defensive that people are starting to shy away from me, and I'm making the fear come true. So wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? And then what's the answer to this? If you're driven by all these fears and you're in sobriety and you're destroying your life sober and you can't seem to stop, what's the answer? Well, the book says Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we're now on a different basis. What's the different basis? The decision we made in step 3. And it says we're on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite, limited, inadequate self. To trust God. The theory of trusting God is easy to accept. The actions of trusting God are very difficult. In the face of my own fear and the conversations in my head. I was before I took my first legitimate 4th step, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. I'm one of those kind of guys that I'm a worrier. And I'll worry myself until I implode almost into a depression. And I hate the anxiety, and yet I can't stop. I think sometimes this delusion that I'm a victim of, this delusion I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I manage well, manifests as I see a potential problem and I think I can make it go away if I think about it enough. Right? And if you've ever tried to do that, it just makes it worse. So I'm at this retreat. There's a guy, Ted Davis, an old-timer there, and talking with Ted. And I told Ted all about this. I said, I don't know, Ted. I get up in the morning, I say the 3rd step prayer, and I just, it's not long after that. I'm full of anxiousness, and I'm uptight, and he said, well, you pray and you have faith in God. I said, yes, I do. I'm sober longer than I've ever been in my whole life since I first took a drink. And I didn't do that, and I know God did that. He said, well, you have faith. He said, but you got to have trust. He said, faith isn't enough. Matter of fact, he said to me, alcoholics of our type can have all the faith in the world and pray all the time and still drink themselves to death. And I have seen that in sobriety. He said, what we must have is trust. And he said, I'll tell you the difference. If you went to a circus and you sat in the audience and you watched a tight wire act and you watched a professional tight wire walker come out to the edge of the platform where the wire starts and he's pushing a wheelbarrow, you could have all the faith in the world. He's a professional. He could walk across that tight wire pushing that wheelbarrow. You'd say to yourself, I bet you've done 1,000 times. Absolute faith he can do it. But if you had trust, you'd climb up there and get in the wheelbarrow and let him push you across. I hated that story. Because I get it. I know what he's talking about. And I understand, because I understand it, and I don't object to it intellectually. I know the value of getting in the wheelbarrow, trusting God. I understand that, and I like reading about it, and I like going to book studies and studying it. I like going out to coffee with people and talking about trusting God, getting in the wheelbarrow. I like philosophizing about what it would be like to be in the wheelbarrow. I just ain't getting in the wheelbarrow. You know what I'm saying? Right, because I'm so afraid and I don't trust God. All I trust is I've listened to my fears for decades and they own me. And to become that vulnerable and to get in that wheelbarrow, if I got in there and became that vulnerable, I think I'd get halfway across that wire. I'd hear that voice. Is that Bob? Is that National Geographic in the magazine store, Bob? Because I don't trust God. So what do you do if you understand, really understand that you need to get in the wheelbarrow, yet emotionally you're incapable of letting go? What do you do? The book talks about getting to a place where you're crushed by self-imposed crises. In other words, you did something to bring this all on. Self-imposed crises you cannot postpone or evade. It's coming at you. And it says at that point, we have to fearlessly face the proposition that God's either everything or he's nothing. Either is or isn't. And then it's asked the question, Bob, what's your choice going to be? And you will make your choice by your actions, not by what you think. And I think what happens to some of us is we live our lives on self-will, and we cause so many consequences, sometimes in sobriety, and they're coming at us. And you get to that point where there's nothing you can do to save yourself from any of it, and it's coming down on you. And there's either a God or you're screwed. First time that ever happened to me, I wasn't sober very long, and I don't even really believe in God yet. I mean, I'm starting to a little bit. I've been praying for a little while, and I'm starting to see some coincidences happen, but I'm not really there yet. And trust? No, I don't trust. Nah. And all of a sudden, I got backed into a corner. I had warrants out. I was convinced I had warrants out for my arrest in Pennsylvania because I'd been sentenced to 2 years in state penitentiary, and the commitment had been stayed by the judge. I was put into a long-term treatment center. I was supposed to stay for a year, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay sober a year. And I went on my last run, and I hitchhiked all the way to Las Vegas from Pennsylvania, and I'm sober about 2 months, maybe, something like that, enough where the fog's lifted. My friend of mine says, he says to the newcomer, when the fog lifts, the planes start to land. And the planes were landed. And the big plane that came in was the fear of the warrants out, the 2 years in prison. Because now the fog's lifted, and I'm starting to think about this stuff. And I'm starting to get really, really uptight, knowing that that's coming at me. It's an eventuality. And I went and I talked to a guy in AA, and I told him, I said, I can't go to jail. I said, this is all happening, and I know that the warrants should be out by now because I missed an appointment with my PO, and they found out that I've been thrown out of the place I was in. I'm sure it's inevitable. And he said to me, you need to call your PO, contact your PO and offer to go back and do the 2 years. And I looked at him like, what, are you crazy? I don't jail well. He said, he wants me to go back. I said, I can't. I'm sober. I'm going to meetings. I'm doing very well. I don't want to go to prison. He said, you have to turn yourself in. I said, no, I don't. He said, yes, you do. He said, do you want to stay sober? Yes. Want to die of alcoholism? No. Well, he says to me, how long are you going to stay physically sober, looking over your shoulder when every time a cop car goes down the street, your gut just wrenches up because you imagine he's got your picture on his dashboard? How long are you going to be able to go until you're going to have to take something to take the edge off of that? How long, kid? Man, he backed me right into a corner. I knew what he was saying is right, and there's nowhere to go. There's no maneuvering room. I ain't got a plan here. There's no way to duck or dodge this thing, and I know what he's saying is right. So he walked me through the process, and he told me to write a letter to my PO. He told me to put the address of the halfway house in the letter. I thought that was a bad idea. I said, they'll be able to come and they'll know where I am. They could come pick me up. He said, oh, yeah. He said, yeah, we want them to be able to do that. My God, there's people in AA that have loving sponsors. I got this guy, Jesus Christ. He said, put your address in there. Tell him that you want to clean this up and you're willing to come back to Pennsylvania at your own cost, your own expense, and make this right, do the time, do whatever they want you to do. Tell him in the letter you'll call him. Say, give him 10 days. Put a date down, 10 days out from the day you send the letter. That'll give him enough time to get the letter, read the letter, talk to his boss or the courts or whoever he has to talk to, discuss till they figure out what they want to do with you. Give him a time and day, 10 days out, and call him then. I wrote the letter, didn't want to write the letter. It was not my idea. It was his letter, not my letter. I didn't want to write this letter. I wrote the letter, showed it to him. He thought it was good. I took it to the mailbox. I dropped it in the mailbox, and instantaneously I'm trying to get my arm in there to get it back. And I just anguished over the next 10 days. I could barely sleep. I would just, in my head, I'm worrying about this. It was brutal. The 10th day came, and I went to the phone in the office, and I went to the phone. I called up, and this woman answered the phone, and I told her who I was, and I was calling so-and-so, and she said, he's expecting your call. She put me right through, and a man answered the phone that I didn't really know. I mean, I sat in his office 2 or 3 occasions, I suppose. He has no reason to like me or stand up for me or help me. I'm just another bum on his case list that didn't show up and do what he's supposed to do. And he answers the phone and he says, I got your letter. Wasn't my letter. He says, I got your letter. And I read it. We took it to my supervisor. We took it to the courts. And you don't have to come back here and do the 2 years. And we're going to keep it down to a misdemeanor. We're not going to jack it back to a felony. And if you can, we'll transfer your case to Nevada, and you'll have to go down to CRS and report down there once a week, and you're probably going to have to take a class on DUI or something, and you might have to give urinalysis down there. But just do whatever they want you to do, and at the end of a year, they'll free you, we're freeing you, and you'll be off the deal. But if you don't do this, there's no more chances. And I thought, oh man, this is easy. I'm glad to do it all. And I got off that phone, and I was so elated, I didn't know if I wanted to laugh or cry. It was something as if some huge weight had been lifted off of me. And I felt a freedom that was unbelievable. And it was the first time in my life that I ever took actions that I didn't believe in, that threatened me, that were not my idea. It was the first time I ever positioned myself in life the way a surrendered person would position themselves. What is surrender? Look in the movies. You see people surrender in war movies. What do? The first thing they do is they abandon all their means of defending themselves. Guns, knives, hand grenades, jeep, tank, whatever. They walk away from it. They abandon it until they're rendered defenseless and absolutely vulnerable. And then they sit down and they wait for someone to tell them what to do. It was the first time I ever took actions that weren't self-serving, that weren't my idea. It was the first time I ever exercised the trust muscle in me. And I came out the other side, and it was good. And I was free. It was like a postcard from a God I don't even believe in. Dear Bob, I got your back. Love, God. And over the years, I've been forced by mistakes I've made and amends I have to face that scare me and all kinds of stuff and fears I've had to walk through to keep getting into the wheelbarrow because of a lack of alternatives. And the trust is like this muscle. The more you take the actions of someone who trusts, the stronger the trust muscle gets. And I'll tell you what happens in time, and this is exactly my experience. It gets a lot easier until it almost becomes effortless. The moment I'm threatened or afraid, I just turn to God. Just turn to God. That is really 180 degrees from everything that I brought here. Because in the old days, the moment I was anxious or afraid, I turned to me. I went up here into the control center and tried to figure it out. I'm one of those kind of guys, when things turn bad, I want to go somewhere and think. And now I'm turning to God and I'm turning towards AA. I'm talking to my sponsor. I'm praying. I'm trying to show up like someone who would show up that really trusts God. One of the things it says in here, in the fear part, it says that when we're afraid, we do two things. And they both involve God. We ask God to remove the fear, and we ask him to turn our attention to what he would have us be. What would God have me be? How would a guy who trusts God, who lives to serve and not to rule, how would a guy who trusts God show up and present himself in life? How would he act in this situation, Bob? Evidently not like you're acting. How would he act? How would a guy who trusts God act here? And then to try to get the vision of what he would have me be, and then when all else fails, try to show up and be that guy. Sometimes when I'm afraid, one of the great efforts in trust is to do nothing. Is to do nothing. Is to position myself where I feel angst, like I need to do something, I need to fix this, and to do nothing and wait. The book says in step 11, we pause when agitated. I think some of us are used to attacking when agitated. To pause when agitated. And if you take your hands off your life, God works best. And what happens in time and time and time and time again is that the problem is not a problem. It will correct itself by itself without your help. Over and over. Does that mean you're always going to get your way? No, because sometimes the correction is you don't get your way, and then time goes by and you go, "Whew, sure glad I didn't get my way." Because we don't know. I don't know what's good for me. I don't know what's some of the things in my life today that I cherish the most. When I was receiving them, I hated it. I didn't want it. And they turn out to be some of the greatest things. And then some of the things that I was so excited to wrest and manipulate and pull into my life, once I got it in there, oh, that was a mistake. I didn't want it. I bet you I'm not the only person in this room that's had targeted some person for a relationship, and you think, oh, this is going to be really good. And then 6 months later, you're going, oh my God, how did I get in this? I can't get out. I'm stuck here. What am I going to do? I think I just might as well kill myself. That's all. I just might as well kill. Because you got what you wanted, and you realize that you don't know what you want. You don't know what's good for you. One of the things that's materialized in my life is a consciousness and a vision, and I really get this, that God's vision of Bob's life is so much better than Bob's best vision of Bob's life. And you know how I know that is when I take my hands off my life and let it unfold, it goes better than it ever could go with extreme effort to make it good. Matter of fact, I think my life is sometimes like a light bulb. If you try to shape it, all you end up doing is cracking it. And then it doesn't work once it's cracked. There's no more light. So I try to live a hands-off. Does that mean I don't respond? No, I respond. I have an appointment, supposed to show up. AA 101. Be where you're supposed to be. Do what you said you were going to do. Respond. Responsibility is the ability to respond to life. Life asked me to go up to London, Ontario and do a workshop. Okay. Get on the plane at a certain time. Okay. I don't need to maneuver. I just need to show up. Just show up. Just go where you're supposed to go. Do what you're supposed to do. Let the chips fall where they may. What an effortless life. What a good life. You know, I wonder, all the anxiety is gone when you're not in charge. Sandy used to say, he said a couple things that just I've kept dear to me ever since. One time he painted a picture. He said, what if your life is like an amazing play that God has orchestrated for your entertainment and for your joy? And if you can just be in the audience and if you're supposed to get up on the stage and say a line, then go back and just sit, then get back to just watching the deal. It's a wonderful play. When you're not directing it, it's a bad deal. Enjoy the show. My friend Scott Redmond, and God's a funny playwright. Oh, he writes some silly stuff, funny stuff. Scott Redmond used to say that he thought when he died, God had asked him one question. Scott, did you get the joke? Because it was you, Scott. Did you get the joke? What an entertaining universe this is if you don't have to run it and it's not your responsibility. What's it say in step 3? That first of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. That takes us up to sex. I have at times been disappointed that the sex inventory isn't actually about sex. Because if it was, fifth steps would be more entertaining. It's about selfishness. It's about dishonesty. It's about fear. It's about selfish inconsideration. It's about unjustifiably arousing jealousy, bitterness, suspicion. It's about harms done to others. It's about developing a vision based on what you could have done better for your future sex life and your relationships. And so what do? Is I make a list of all the people that I've had sexual energy with, all the people I've pursued or been with or whatever. And I'm doing that to look at how self gets even tweaked even further when the 3 basic instincts are aroused that Wilson talks about in the 12 steps and 12 traditions. He said the things that drive us are the instinct for sex, the instinct for security, both emotional and material, and the instinct for a place in society. In other words, what other people think of you. And in the sexual relationship arena is possibly the only thing you could participate in where all 3 of those instincts can be highly threatened. If you've ever gone through a divorce, I don't know what it's like up here, but where I come from, it's community property, which means going through a divorce, first of all, your sex life is threatened because that's your material security is threatened because chances are they're going to end up with half of whatever you got. I had a friend that was married and divorced 5 times in sobriety. He said the saddest thing I ever heard. He said, every time I get divorced, they get half. He said, the halves are getting smaller. I heard that and went, oh yeah, oh boy. Oh. And society, and emotional security, and society. I don't know anyone who wants to wants to go to their family or their AA group and tell them that relationship is a failure. That I'm going through a divorce. I don't know anybody who wants people to know that don't. It's terrible. It's embarrassing. So this is the one area where all 3 of those can be threatened, and consequently, the greater potential for self-centered fear. And if what Bill says is true, if fear really is the muscle of the ego, then it's the greater potential to activate all our defects of character is in relationships. Because of we can be the most threatened there. There's an old adage, you hear people kid around, say things like, getting into a relationship is like pouring Miracle Grow on your defects. I mean, well, I don't know. But I do know that you can get a lot of fear when there's a lot of joy when they go well, but there's a lot of fear when they don't. And so we take a look at this and we list all these relationships, and then there's 9 questions. In each relationship, and it's where, so this is like bullet points. Okay, with this person, first person, Where had I been selfish? Where were you me first? Where did you dress it up and try to look kind and loving and all that stuff, but you're really concerned about you? When push came to shove, it was your security. It was your comfort. It was your way. It was your finding. Where were you selfish? Where were you dishonest? Dishonesty, I've come to believe, causes more problems in relationships than anything else. And because it ties back into old core beliefs and ideas that we have. And one of them, and this rides some of us well into sobriety for years. The idea that if you knew everything about me that I know about me, that you would probably feel about me the way I feel about me. The fear of rejection drives guys like me and people like us often to misrepresent ourselves. And we don't do it. We know we're supposed to be honest. We get that. So it's not out and out lies. What I do is I did this from the time I was 11 years sober after my first divorce till I was probably 15. I would meet someone and they just light me up, and I would introduce them to, it's kind of like Bob. It's Bob-like. It's what I'm introducing them to. It's like the best of Bob on steroids on his very best day. That's the Bob you're going to meet. Well, but that's not the real Bob, because we all got warts. We all got little things from time to time. We all got our little self, all that stuff. We all got that stuff. But I am so afraid that if you knew all about me, that you would reject me. And then what happens? Well, that person's falling in love with a facade. You know what happens when that happens? You immediately will lose respect for them because it's just another mark you've fooled. There's an old adage from Groucho Marx. It's funny. But I turn it around and change it a little bit. That when you find someone that really, really loves you, they're automatically below your standards. I mean, because you want somebody with good taste, don't you? I mean, right? Right? That's fun. There's remnants of that in me today. I just laugh at it though. It doesn't own me. It's funny, but sometimes I'll be at a conference somewhere and I'll be speaking, and and people will come up and say wonderful things about you, right? And it's nice. I mean, it's nice on one hand, but the minute they start, it's like I start losing respect for them. It's like, oh, it's the best talk I ever heard. Boy, are you stupid. Jesus. I don't say that. I mean, I don't say that. I don't say it. My sponsors taught me just to say thank you. Just thank you. That's very kind. Just to say that. But it's hard. You could insult me. You could tell me you think I'm a selfish, self-centered son of a bitch, and I would go, yeah, yeah, I am. That's right. And I would instantly have a lot of respect for you. I think, now this guy's smart. But you start telling me I'm wonderful, there's something wrong with you. And that it's funny, I'm 36 and a half years sober, and I still, from time to time, find those little quirky little reactions. The only difference, I think, is I laugh at them. I think they're silly and entertaining. I have become, over the years, as a result of this trusting in God and watching the show rather than running it, I've become my favorite comic and my favorite audience at the same time. And if once you can start to laugh at yourself, oh my God, life's wonderful because you're always just amazingly and newly entertained from moment to moment as you start to get the joke, right? As you start to get the joke. I sponsor a lot of guys. Oh, the entertainment value in some of them is off the charts. I mean, Aaron, oh my God, he's like 5 episodes of Benny Hill. I mean, all just 10 minutes with him. It's like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm like that with my sponsor. Oh, because and what happens is I get free of myself as I start to laugh at myself, and I don't laugh at you, I laugh at the me that is in you, because it's silly in me and it's silly in you too. All the things I worry about and all the things, all the positioning and all the defense, it's just silly stuff. So I started asking myself, where was I dishonest? And there's this pathological dishonesty that alcoholics are capable of. You know, it uses a term in our book over and over again. The term is self-delusion. It doesn't talk about denial in the first 164 pages. That's something that came in around AA through treatment centers back in the late 70s and 80s. We talk about something more insidious than denial. It's called self-delusion. Denial is you're lying, you know you're lying, you're keeping, you're denying. Self-delusion is you're dishonest and you don't even know it. You don't even know it. It's a psychotic, wishful thinking. And we do it in relationships. It's like, I'm not really the guy you need to be with, but I want to be with you so bad that I start imagining I could be that guy. Or you're not really the person. I need 6 or 7 points of compatibility to make this work. You have one of them. It's usually good sex. And then I will imagine you have the other 5 and then get angry when you don't demonstrate them. Now, who's the crazy person here? It's not you. You never said you had those things. I'm the guy with the psychotic, wishful thinking that wants you. I just believe it under my tutelage that you'll come around. That I can, we don't have relationships. We buy abandoned fixer-uppers. Right. And it's the old Pygmalion My Fair Lady syndrome. Oh, I'll fix her up. She'll be grateful forever. I mean, right? And it's never that way. It never works out that way at all. It never works out that way. Oh. Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Self-centered people have a horrid degree of inconsideration, and we're not conscious of it. Oh my God. What it is that I'm so wrapped up looking at stuff that's going on with me, I don't see you. It's not conscious. It's not malicious. It's just I got me right here. And when I'm right here, I don't see you. I have a guy, a sponsor. He's married to a lovely gal, and he adores her. He really does. And he's got, ever since he's been sober, he's got a pretty high-powered job now, and it's very important to him to be on time for appointments and dinners and things. Matter of fact, he believes he feels like if he's not a couple minutes early, he's late. Very important to him. And he's had conversations with his wife about how important this is. And she's on board. Yes, honey, I get it. I get it. Well, they're going out to an important corporate dinner. And they have to be there at 8 o'clock. Takes 20 minutes to get there. So he tells her they have to be there at 7:30 because he knows how she is. Right? And it looks like a good plan. Now she's running a little late. Okay, but they're still going to make it in plenty of time. It's going to be good. And she's getting ready to leave, and there's a mirror in the foyer of their house, and she walks by the mirror and looks in the mirror and goes, no, that dress doesn't work. And she goes back upstairs and starts all over again. And he's late again. And it drives him crazy. And here's the sad part. she doesn't know she thinks, she doesn't see that she's making him late. She sees that that's not the right dress. In her consciousness, there's no malice there. She doesn't even get it. Guys do the same thing. Guys will kind of be watching a football game, and the wife might as well just not exist. I mean, just because he's so focused. I had an experience years ago. I was dating a gal. I was sober 15 years probably. She was sober about 7. And I was a past chairman of the local convention at the time at the Riviera, and I went with my date. She could care less about the convention. She just was going with her boyfriend to some AA event. And there's a big hospitality room with 2 doors, one at each end, and I'm standing at the one door with my girlfriend talking, and I look down, and coming through the other door is a dear, dear friend of mine. Matter of fact, he just passed away a couple of days ago with over 50 years, a guy named John H. And John was a dear friend. I spent time at his house at a bad point in my sobriety. We've been very close. And John comes through with his wife and some friends, and I was so, oh my God, I was so excited to see him because he lives in Atlanta, and I don't see him very often. And I just got lit up the minute I saw him. And oh my God, John! And I ran down and gave him and his wife a hug. And I was so excited. Now that is my experience. My date, on the other hand, has been left standing all by herself at the end of a hospitality room while her boyfriend runs off to be with his buddies. I didn't even know I did that. Later, I knew more about what I did than I ever imagined I needed to know. Did she get hurt? Yeah, she got hurt. Did I try to hurt her? Did I intend to? No, I didn't intend to hurt her. I didn't even know I'm doing that. That's the inconsideration that's manifested by self-centered, self-focused people. We're not awake to we don't see ourselves the way others see us. And I think that's 90% of the spiritual awakening here, as we start to wake up to what our actions look like to the rest of the world. And I'll tell you something. When this happens, the world starts to change. Because now there's no more mystery. Now you know why she left you. Because you see it from her point of view, and oh my God, I'd have left me too. You know why the bosses fired you. You know why? Because you stand in their shoes and look at it, and you would have fired you too. You stop looking at life through the excuses and the justifications, and you start seeing what everybody else has seen all along, the truth. The truth. And this is a different world. It's a good world. It's God's world. It's a great world to enjoy. It's a great world to be entertained in. It's a great world to learn how to love. It's a great world to serve in. It's just a terrible, terrible world to try to control. But it's a great world to love and serve in. Let's take a 7-minute, 18-second break.